Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have an excellent game to share with you from the 1996 Spanish Team Championship held in Oropesa del Mar, Spain. On the white end, Anatoly Karpov playing against Boris Gulko. This game here noted as the Jewel of Oropesa. The opening we have here, a Queen's Gambit accepted. Knight f3 follows. If e3, e5 is a strong response, so white holds up that idea, first developing the knight, and only one move later plays e3. Now, how black plays it here allows white to regain the pawn without any fight. Plays e6 here. If black does put up some fight, with let's say b5, we would see this typical undermining of black's queenside structure with first a4, and then b3. And with this arrangement, white is in a spot to meet either capture away from the center with the capture towards the center. Okay, how black plays it here, goes with e6, bishop ready to go, pawn regained, white's strongest pawn challenged, castles, knight f6, bishop takes a step back, sidesteps, b5 with tempo. Black goes with knight c6 here. I wondered a bit about this structure. Suppose black still continues with b5 here. What's a good response? a4 would be a good response. If b4, you have a c4 square to work with. Also, if c4 here, you don't have too many options. You go to c2. Black has this queenside majority now after c4 move. If b4, c4 can easily fall, queen, knight can target it, and in the case of, let's say, bishop b7, this should look familiar. Once more, we would have this challenging idea, this challenging move, b3. There's a reason I'm drawing some special attention to this arrangement of pawns on the queen side. Things will be slightly different as more pieces are developed. Okay. How is it played in this game? We do not see b5, knight c6 it is, knight c3, and the follow-up from here is bishop to e7. At that point, white goes ahead and takes on c5, only after the bishop has taken a step. Now, that's going to spark a queen exchange. We'll be looking at not an ending, queenless middle game. I wondered, what if black holds off on the bishop move right here? After the bishop moves, that's a more interesting moment for white to go ahead and take on c5. Bishop will have to take another step to collect the pawn. What if black inserts b5 in this position? What's the response here? Well, it's not maybe what you think in this position. I already drew attention to this a4 move. In a couple lines, a4 would no longer be a good move because after the response b4, this knight is given a kick and it doesn't have a good reaction. It doesn't have a nice forward move here. So what would be a good move in the case of b5 rather than a bishop move? Queen e2 is healthy here, preparing to meet this capture with rook d1, working on a pin. In the case of b4, knight a4 is available. In the case of c4, you once more back off with the bishop. And in this position here, you could go with a4. b4, there's knight e4 jump. Important not to play the move b3 in this position because the knight here on c3 would be vulnerable. That could run into queen a5, targeting that piece. How do you defend? Do you play bishop to d2? You could soon be looking at b4, the knight is kicked, c3, the bishop is kicked, and all of a sudden, black is working with a very dangerous connected passed c pawn. These are important details. The structure here, important to weigh it very carefully on the queen side. All right, how it is played in this game after knight c6, knight c3, bishop e7 on board. Now we get the capture on c5. Queens are exchanged, bishop taking a second step to recapture. And let's get some more developing moves in here. Bishop d2, bishop d7 is played here. Important not to go for a fianchetto here as black. Playing b5, that would be losing already. b5 very weakening, knight unprotected. Now, bishop unprotected. You're already looking at rook a to c1 and knight captures b5. This is a decisive advantage for white. So, it's the more reserved, tame-looking move here. Bishop d7, rook a to c1. Bishop gets out of the way. It's just going to be a target to a knight move. Rook. Okay, bishop backing off to e1. And from here, king to e7. So there's still a lot of material around. It's just the queen. It's the only piece exchanged. Is the king okay here? It is, but proceed with caution. Follow up here, knight a4, eyeing that c5 square. And black's response is b6. Says, I don't want to see your knight dive into c5. Now, a healthier move for black would be to develop this rook to d8 and allow the knight to hop into c5 and be prepared to give up the bishop for knight and play this position here. Follow up with this typical maneuver out of the Queen's Gambit accepted, backing the bishop off and welcoming some exchanges here. Okay, not how black plays it. Black does not want to see the knight hop to c5, so it's b6. Pop quiz. How would you respond here? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, did you spot this one? We have an exchange sacrifice. After black's last move, b6, c6 is sensitive. White is taking advantage of this weakness with this combination. You have to recapture with the king to defend the vulnerable c6 knight. If you recapture here, it's collected. So king captures rook. Not the end of the continuation. Before going for that exchange sacrifice, you had to see this follow-up idea. Knight captures pawn, check. Bishop captures knight. That sacrifice there has cleared the way for bishop a4. What a beast. Unopposed light square bishop, you're now in a pin. Big problem here on that c6 square. How do you defend the knight? Right around the corner, there's knight e5, adding a third attacker. It could only be defended twice. Now, black plays in one of the best ways, ends up fleeing with the king towards the b file. If black tries to hang on to the knight with either rook here to c8, I want to touch on each briefly. You do something slightly different in each case. If rook h defends the knight, or at least tries to defend the knight, we would have bishop captures knight straight away. And we have a fork here, so this rook now on a8 could end up falling. So rook captures bishop here. Now we dive in with a fork. That rook will be collected. What do you do here as black? King c7, you're asking for bishop captures rook straight away. If king d8, we would have first rook d1 with check. King d8, bishop captures rook. Your rook will fall. So king d8, rook d1 first, and then you collect the rook. And what happens if king e7, sidestepping rook d1 with check? Well, king e7, there would first be bishop b4 check, forcing that king to go to d8, and then we would have the check followed up with bishop captures rook. How are things maybe a little bit different if this rook plays here to c8? Knight e5 straight away is best. Now what do you do with the king? You're ready to take this knight in a few different ways. King here, knight takes knight with check. King here, you could go for a fork. It's a big problem however you slice it here for Team Black. Okay, Black at this stage here says, okay, this knight's down for the count. Let me get my king to what I feel at least is a safe square. Makes a run for it. King c8, and now this follow-up, knight e5. I love this move. You could take, at this point here, you could take with the bishop, with the knight, but absolute best is knight e5, and it makes a lot of sense. You're not showing your hand just yet. What do we have here? A knight that's still pinned, hit 3 times, and you're not telling Black just yet which piece will do the recapturing. If you go here, probably looking at bishop captures. You go here, probably looking at knight captures because it's hitting with check. You keep Black guessing. King b8 in this game. The knight does the recapturing with check. King b7 from here. White's follow-up, the evaluation I should note here, about +1. After the move knight to e5, it drops. It says it's about equal. The absolute best here, it points out knight e7. Now, it looks like the knight is maybe asking for some trouble, or are you going to get maybe trapped? Not the case here. After the move in the game, knight to e5, that's a window for Black to compete for the c6 square. After knight e5, rook a c8 is played. If this top move, knight e7, is played, that covers the rook c8 idea and paves the way next for bishop c6 check, bishop f3, and then knight c6. And that's going to be really dangerous for Black. That position there, bishop on f3, knight on c6, what's happening? Bishop covers the 2 light. The knight covers these 2 dark squares. Right around the corner, we're looking at potentially discovered checks. Very dangerous position here for Black. It says best here is rook to a7. Okay. Anyhow, knight e7, not played here. It's knight e5, sensible. You're targeting a pawn here. You have in mind a skewer. Rook c8 played. Bishop c6 check. Maintaining the rooks. And now collecting the f7 pawn. Rook f8. Knight e5. Evaluation here around equal. Black's response, knight d5. It's jumping back up to about +1. Top moves here for Black. It says activate the rook. Target a knight. Okay, none of the above. Knight improvement in this game. Rook d1, rook f d8, and now the bishop backs off, opens up the c6 square for the knight. A fork right around the corner. Black covers that while offering a rook exchange. Now, White doesn't want a rook exchange, plays it here with knight d7, clogs up the d file. Computer says you have your pick. You could go for a rook exchange. You could also play it where you duck the rook exchange altogether. Feels a little awkward to play rook to b1, but that's one of the moves that has its eye on. I tested out the rook exchange. I wondered, is it really okay allowing this rook to become active? At the end, it's saying it's going to be no problem. Rook b1, you're cool. You can watch over b2 in a convenient way. Okay. Karpov's approach here, let's not go for a rook exchange so easily. So d file, clogged up. Follow-up from here is knight d5. A little bit flimsy looking. I wondered about the typical deflecting the defender strategy here. Rook c4. I tested out this move here. It's not a big deal. You could simply back off in this case, bishop b3, and eye that e6 pawn. Okay, no problems there. Knight d5, the move played. Follow up from here, king f1. Another healthy move, knight to e5. Karpov's move, king f1. Now, before he could play this move, he had to test out sacrifices on e3. That's what black goes for. Bishop captures e3 here. Ends up being a blunder. Now, we'll see why shortly. If we revisit rook c4 in this position, with the knight on d5 rather than e7, things are slightly different. The move in this position would not be bishop to b3. Knight captures b6 would be a move here. And then, after the recapture, bishop to b3. The problem with bishop b3 in this position is that after rook captures knight, bishop captures rook, there's a liability here, an unprotected rook that can be exploited. Knight captures e3 is there in the end with check, and the rook will fall next. Okay. How it is played here, bishop captures e3. Anything else to touch on? If black goes for, let's say, this knight f6 move, bishop c3 is healthy. And from here, it's looking at rook c7. Rook c7, knight captures bishop, a two bishops versus rook and knight position. It prefers white there. And also, if we have mass exchanges, this would be excellent. Another imbalance that would be winning for white here. Fork in the end. We'll soon be looking at a bishop and two pawns versus a rook. Okay, black's move here after king f1 is bishop captures e3. Now what? How do you approach this position? If you'd like to, go ahead, pause the video. What move would you play here? Okay, the follow-up from here is rook captures knight. If you take the bishop, you will be losing. Knight captures e3 check, knight captures rook, and rook captures knight with check. In the end, there's rook d8, pin and win of the bishop. So, how to approach this? At this point, after the sacrifice on e3, rook captures knight. Pawn captures rook, pawn captures bishop. The king not on the same, not in a vulnerable position here opposite this rook. Okay, things are cool now. White will be able to consolidate and is in the driver's seat from this point on. These three minor pieces outweigh black's rooks. Let's see the conversion here. Rook c4. There's only two moves here for white. One, bishop a5, trying to release the pressure on the knight, give the rook a kick. Or, the move in the game, b4, cutting off the rook's pressure on the bishop. Bishop c3, clear at this stage. White is in control. Bishop ready to be parked on d4. Fantastic post. Pawn is poison. There would be a fork. Where do we go from here? a5, a3, b4 is maintained. Knight hit. You can back off once more, eyeing that c6 square. That's going to hurt. Only one way out of this. You got to move that rook out of the way with check. Move the king. Okay. You've prevented the fork, but what are you supposed to do now with these rooks? The minors are dominant here. Bishop c6 check. b5. This isn't going anywhere. That's stable. Rook f5. Knight f3. Rook e4. Maybe looking at g4 or a4. White cuts out the g4 square. Rook gets active over here on the a file. g4. Rook check. Okay. Have to be a little bit cautious here how to react to this check. He blocks with the knight. If you block with the bishop, this would be losing here. There'd be a trick rook captures knight. King captures and then rook captures bishop. It's the knight that blocks. And now what are you supposed to do with the rook? Black at this stage inserts d4. Not sure why that move was even flicked in this game. Okay, d4 played here. Bishop captures pawn, and at this stage, black resigns. I mean, what was black maybe hoping for after d4 that white goes ahead and takes the rook and allows this, and then the knight to fall? Not happening. You simply take the pawn. Black resigns here. If the game continued, what are you supposed to do here? Where do you go with the rook? You only have a few options, and a couple of them one of them terrible straightaway. Rook f8, you drop the g7 pawn. Rook f7, you run into a fork. And rook g5, there's no rush here, keep in mind. You don't have to act fast. You could slowly improve. These bishops here, I'm just to map it out. Look at all of the squares that they are covering. They have a lot of squares in mind here. Ways to improve: get out of the pin, move the king forward, maybe there's a check, maybe another one. A line like this really highlights the ground these monster bishops that are both unstable squares cover. The rook only has one safe square here. a5. Can improve the king. At this point, look forward to improving the knight with tempo, improving the knight again with tempo, and by that point, you're already in a spot to roll with your furthest advanced passed pawn. Knight covering c6 there. You're ready to go with b6. Okay, that's one possible path, not the only one. Very smooth game here by Karpov. 3 minor pieces outweighing the rooks. Fantastic game here. Anyhow, what are your thoughts with this one? Feel free as usual to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.